Hello, we got in the motion with me, Yavor Ivanov, the main host, and with my co-host Kubrat Ivanov, more known as Kubi. Today we have my favorite subject, ancient history of Rome.
And for such a special topic, we need a guest that is just as special. So today we're welcoming Associate Professor Alexander Thein. He is an undergraduate from the University of Oxford, has graduated with a PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, and has spent 2 years of research in Berlin. He currently lectures at UCD, and he's prolonged and filled with experience and knowledge, so he's just the man for the job. How are you, Mr. Thein?
Thank you for having me on here.
Thank you for accepting the invitation and coming along today, because we are really excited. Especially me, I love Roman history, so for me it's almost,
It's an honor. Because
big honor, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, like even for myself to get prepared for this episode, I had to read a little bit, and my dad obviously taught me more specifically and in depth about different topics and times throughout the Roman history. So I was very excited today to meet you, and to start off the episode, it's the question we ask everybody that's gone deep into their career. What sparked your interest in history, and especially about ancient Rome? Like, was it maybe a book that you read when you were younger, or something that you saw?
So the book was Asterix. It's not everyone reads it anymore. Have you read?
No, I haven't read it.
You haven't? Anyway, so this is going back to, I have to confess, this would be the early 1980s. And in my primary school, they wanted to get everyone reading, and they gave everyone a flyer for a book club.
Mm-hmm.
So the deal was, if you joined the book club, then you would order a book to buy once every month or so. And I looked at the catalogue, and there was one that was Asterix the Legionary, or one of the Asterix ones, and I just thought that was good. And so then I got started on reading them. So they're basically, but you know what they are? They're comics.
Yeah.
And they're funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I just remember.
So it's like Asterix the Gaul.
Yeah.
There are various characters that are quite well known. And once you get into it, you can sort of read them at different layers.
Yeah.
So yes, they are fun. They're something for kids, but they're quite intelligent as well. One of the bits that I always found interesting when I was reading them as a kid was that there was always lots of Latin quotations. There were a couple of characters that would always quote Latin, and now I can read them, and they're actually quite funny. So one of the bits was one of the characters says something very intelligent, quoting one of the great Latin authors, and one of the other characters says to him, stop making facetious comments and help me with it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I know this comic very well, and I think when you went to Paris, they had some kind of a park.
I went to the theme park there with roller coasters and everything, and they even had Greek sections there, and the Roman, and then there was also and there was a Colosseum built there.
But
so
you weren't tempted to buy any of them. You weren't tempted to buy any of the comics.
Oh, they weren't selling them. I didn't actually see.
That's strange.
Yeah, which was very strange, because they had the whole parade going with all the characters, everybody dressed up, and you had the emperor. But I couldn't find any comics that they sold. They sold food, merch,
the French comics originally, and then translated in English, Bulgarian, and so many languages, because so, how you said, interesting and funny, and also you can learn from it.
But the best thing about it is that the English translations were they were translations as in, they weren't just trying to say what the French says. They were translating it so that it's funny and makes sense for the English audience as well. So that worked very well. One of the things that's quite funny is the names that people.
Oh, Obelisk was the stocky guy.
I because I haven't read any of the comics, I learned about the characters there, both spending a few hours. But as I said, there was no comics there. They didn't sell them. So
that is really strange.
Yeah, strange in the park and dedicated
in the
place
place
for them and not selling it.
So most of them, the really good ones, and of course I'm biased on this, they're the ones that were written up until when I was buying them.
Yeah.
But they've done a few more recent ones that are not quite as good. But the drawings are still very good.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how I got interested.
Yeah.
And from then on, I ended up going to a school that taught Latin, and I thought to myself, well, that could be interesting because then I get to understand what's in asterisks, and of course it takes you a lot longer before you actually understand just 3 or 4 words or 2 or 3 lines. But that was my sort of let's say career path within the subject. So asterisks, doing Latin at school, and then I quite liked it, and then carried on.
And just a follow-up question, do you believe that nowadays there should be more schools that teach Latin as a subject or subject of choice? Because nowadays in Ireland it's only the private schools that get those type of classes, while the public ones don't.
So they're deprived of some of the kids. I'm sure there are kids who want to study Latin and they can't afford it to do it, to go to private school, which I think is a bit unfair.
So I would definitely say if schools want to offer it, there should be the opportunity. There should be the opportunity for kids that want to learn about this stuff to do that. There are different ways of answering that question. So I think the private schools would be the ones where you would be doing Latin or Greek. There are many other schools, not private schools, that would do civilization. So in that sense, there is an avenue. And one of the really good initiatives that UCD has been doing, probably for the last 5 years or so, is something called Access Classics, where staff members go out to schools, tell them about classics, give them, as an example, a little lesson in Greek. So it's Bridget Martin that does this, in case you met her before. And that's been very successful, so people love this sort of thing, certainly to get a bit of exposure. And even if people don't do it at school, that means they know roughly what it is, and maybe they can do it later.
Okay, that's great. I actually didn't know about that.
Whichever school yours is,
we
can go there.
Yeah.
If you're still at
school. I still am. Yeah, I'm actually going into 5th year this September when I'm coming back, and we're starting the Leaving Cert preparations. So I have a fun 2 years ahead of me.
Very trivial, but I forgot to offer drinks. Sorry now. If you want some help yourself.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's always a tradition in an episode where we always have a drink or two. And now as a professor, what do you prefer to do more? Teach or lecture? Or is it working on your research? Because we know that to become a professor, you have a lot of research work. You have to go into your own field of area and just provide a lot of information to stack up on your resume. Which do you prefer now that you've done both?
So I would say that the trick is to get some balance. So there are a lot of people who who spend a lot of time looking forward to that period in the summer, or maybe research leave, where they can focus entirely on what people call their own work. But there are certain things that I guess tie into this. So firstly, the students have to come first. So whatever it is that we teach has to be what we think of as our primary job. That is how we get paid. If you have a job in university, that is what your primary task is. The research is really important, but at the same time, it is possible to put that on too much of a pedestal. So you imagine what it's going to be like to have that free time where you can devote yourself to that work. But in order for that to be successful for you, what you really need to be doing is finding some time during teaching to put half an hour, a small segment of time to your research while you're doing your teaching, because otherwise you'll get to your big free time and you won't be ready. So that's one issue. The other issue is, how can you get the two of them to work together? So whatever you do for your research, it has to be something that someone wants to know about. So there are questions you might think, okay, what do I find interesting? Where can I make a contribution? Where can I say something new? But whatever that is, if that's not something that grabs people's attention, and when I say people, It can be your fellow researchers. It can be the general public. Ideally, you want something that's a big idea, new, gets all of your academic colleagues to say wow, and has an impact for the general public. That would be the ideal. And there's very few projects that can really tick all of those boxes, but that really should be what people are aiming for.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you think about Roman history, is there anything that you've come across recently where you've thought, actually, that is really quite special? That is something that I hadn't thought of, something that really makes a difference, something that is like something wow factor.
Well, for me, maybe in the news, even when you were my lecturer in UCD, because Mr. Thein was my lecturer, and I really enjoy his classes, and that always they proclaim in the television that they found the cave of Romulus and Remus, which was quite interesting for me. But I said, how do they know that this? It wasn't kind of supported with strong fundamental evidence, and things like that strike me, but they are not backed up by evidence.
Are you thinking of the Lupercal? Yeah. So, the cave of Romulus and Remus. In that particular example, and I haven't looked into the details, so I'm guessing somewhat. The identification would be based on the location. So, the location fits the identification somewhat. And so you can go down that route, but ultimately it allows you to sell the find.
It's advertising, because it was coming from Italy, this news. And the other thing which struck me maybe a few years ago, it's not that recent, that some scientific research showed that in the 3rd and 4th century the weather changed, and the rainfall was much less, which they refer that could be one of the reasons the Roman Empire started to decline, which I find it really interesting, because not only the science related to history, but also that it makes sense, because they will have less harvest, then less taxations, and then less money for paying the army or wherever to rebuild the cities if they are struck by fire or earthquake. So that's the two in my head now about it. But next question is, I have the honor to ask the third question. What periods or personas in Roman history are really, for you, the most interesting?
So we know each other, and you're thinking that I'm going to answer in. You think you know what the answer is going to be. So the person that I do most of my work on is Sulla. So we're talking 1st century BC. It is a very important period. There's an article by Badian, which I think is one of the best articles on the topic, and he says that this period is of interest second to none. That's the way he says it, and I think he's exaggerating, even though I work on that stuff. So if you had to ask me what I find the most interesting for a number of reasons, it's actually what I teach, and that's the Age of Augustus. So I find that more interesting, but it just so happens that the research that I do is on the period, the generation before that. So there's different challenges, and the stuff that I do, there's fewer people work on it. One of the reasons fewer people work on it is that there's less to work with. So if we're thinking about the evidence we have, literary texts, coinage, archaeology, all of those things, there's a lot less for Sulla, for Marius, for the 18th BC. For Augustus, all of that evidence, there's an abundance of it. Sometimes you can actually track what's happening day by day, week by week. The number of coins is amazing, just the quality of them, the way that they tell stories. Everything is just perfect for teaching. There's just so much you can do with the Augustan period. So maybe I should shift my focus into there. But I guess that's one of those things you have to do quite gradually, because once you start working on a period, you feel confident that you know the scholarship, and then when you move into something else, you feel you've got an uphill struggle task
Mhm.
to sort of get on top of everything.
Mhm.
But if you have to ask me which period is the most interesting, is the Augustan period. That's where things changed the most. It's one of these turning points in Roman history.
Yeah.
And there's just so much wealth and richness of everything. I mean, sculpture as well as
Yeah.
architecture, coinage, everything's there.
So I guess as well your favorite person in that sense is Augustus in the Roman history.
Probably.
One of them.
And I think it's, in some ways, it's safer to say that you like Augustus.
Mhm.
Yeah, but
Mhm.
other Roman emperors that were fond of other things.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you said your favourite emperor is Nero, people would then start asking you why is
Or Caligula.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Do you have a favourite emperor?
I have.
Oh, yeah. But
Even
you never
it's
told me.
like nickname in Bulgaria as well, Tiberius.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Tiberius is my favorite for many reasons. Yeah,
Okay.
he was a great general. He was a strong character. He was a great statesman. As well, he had a lot of sadness. Not that I feel sorry for him, but even though he had this sadness that he has to divorce with the wife he loves, forced by your favorite Augustus. He proved himself in the battlefield. He endured very harsh weather in Germania, and so for many reasons he will be my favorite. And also is the same sign like me, Scorpio, but that's just a joke. It doesn't matter if it's from my side or not. But yeah, he will be my favorite.
Yeah, for me, obviously, I'm nowhere near either of your guys' level of knowledge.
You can still have
But
a favourite.
I'm very fond of the way Augustus actually taught, the way he was ruthless, and I actually have a question about that from before, so I don't want to kind of jump ahead because I have a question that correlates to Caesar and Augustus themselves, so that's for later on into the podcast. And no, I think I'm fond of Augustus just because of some of the knowledge that I know.
And also the aesthetics. Portrait.
Yeah,
It's a nice aesthetics if you like the classical art, classical style.
True. My next question is going back before Augustus. Do you think Sulla struck the first blow to the Roman Republic? I mean, we had this discussion before, but I want to ask you, do you think as bringing the army in the Pomeranium, I mean, against Rome, leading the army, even though he left only one officer who supported him, but do you think with this precedent he delivered the first blow to the Republic?
First, maybe not. All depends how you define the question. So if it's about bringing the army in, then you can make that case. However, sometimes it can be a little bit of a point scoring game where people try to figure out who's to blame. So I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I thought maybe this could be something that you might want to ask about. And the reason is that Elon Musk tweeted something about Sulla. So did you catch that?
No, I haven't.
No.
Okay. Do you want me to tell you the story?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
So I had to make some notes because my memory wouldn't be good enough to get everything.
Yeah.
So this is why I've got these because I want to be able to see. So the way things started is that there was somebody on Twitter, and I don't know who this person is. It's described as a venture capitalist. His name is David Sachs, and he tweeted the following. And the context was the investigations into Hunter Biden. So this goes back to June, so not too long ago. In case anyone's watching, this is June 2023.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the original tweet said, in the days of the Roman Republic, senatorial families were often paid patronage by foreign kings. In this way, they could be relied upon to intervene on the king's behalf. Okay. And so we've got a statement there. There's a reference to Jugurtha to back up the statement. Whenever I see statements like that, and I do see things like this quite often on Twitter, where this is one of those things where academic interests sometimes don't overlap with popular interests. That sometimes people will tell you things on Twitter that even though I've been reading stuff for a long time, I'll come across things that are new, and I don't get worried about that.
Yeah.
I don't think to myself, "Oh, I should have known that." I just think, "Oh, that's interesting. I've learned something, possibly, or maybe there's something that is not quite right." So this one, this idea of the statement, senatorial families are often in the pay of foreign kings. It doesn't come across to me as something that is, a generalisation that's totally right. There's something seems off about it, but leaving that aside, maybe there's a reason. I'm not going to judge on that. So then we had a response. So Elon Musk says, perhaps we just need a modern day Sulla. That's what his response was. And if you have to think, what does he mean by that? So if you just look at that original tweet, it's all about corruption. It's all about implying that there's some, because I guess the reason that he brought Sulla into it is that the example that was cited in the previous one was Jugurtha, which is Marius, and then Marius, the enemy Sulla. This idea that it's both. If you had to just summarize it very briefly, it would be a case of we need someone to come in and sort things out. That a no nonsense person to sort things out. That was the sentiment that came through, and then predictably there was a lot of pushback against Elon Musk's tweet, and some of it was very partisan, and there are a few examples that I could give you. People identifying themselves as Roman historians. Usually everything is then politicized and polarized. So we've got one individual who says Sulla is perhaps the most repulsive figure from the entire history of Rome, and is a dog whistle figure for fascists who are afraid to name their other heroes in polite company. So this is one response, and I did come across an article which was sort of analysing the tweet, and in the responses to the article, again, things got rather interesting. So someone was talking about polarisation. Some of the other comments started talking about patricians and plebeians, and of course we could go into the details of what we should understand by that, and whether or not some of the comments have some misconceptions. But the basis for making those comments was to start talking about immigration. Then we had, and you can imagine how any discussion online about immigration will end up being very polarised. Another thread ended up talking about Christianity, the shift from, let's say, Rome to Christianity, and that shift being viewed as a disaster for mankind. And then finally I saw one comment which was maybe the correct one, where someone wrote, "For goodness sake, it was a joke." But the reason I thought this was interesting is
it is interesting. Only the comment you mentioned about plebs and aristocracy in Rome, it's kind of plausible because, and it's expectable because Sulla, as we all know, he was supporting the aristocracy and the establishment of them full power, if you like. That's very interesting. But also I'm very against people who hasn't enough knowledge to make comments about history in Twitter or in Facebook. Because some of them become very vicious, and they maybe read one of the previous episodes we had about my experience as a historian and what I study and what I think of history, is it important and so on. And I said that I find it quite even disgusting with people who hasn't read and making general conclusions. They really fight like they read 1,000,001 books, historians, and I try to stay away from this. In this case, it's interesting, but in a lot of times turn to be something nasty and ugly.
Well, that's the
for me as a historian.
But the best way to think about the comments that you read on Twitter. So someone put it brilliantly. They said, just remember, 50% of all people are below average intelligence, by definition.
Yeah.
By definition.
That's good. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
But just going back to that tweet, so there was an article which was then trying to explain who Sulla was, why Musk was making these comments, why Musk was wrong, and I thought something was interesting just in the way that we see this discussion developing. So, for the listeners, I'll just read out one section where it's sort of explaining who Sulla was. So it's talking about Sulla seizing power in Rome, so becoming the first military dictator. That makes sense. Then we have a reference to him re-establishing traditional values after a period of political upheaval and rooting out corruption. So this is the idea that's coming through, or the idea that's been put forward. Then after 3 years, he did something unexpected. He voluntarily retired. And then we've got this idea that once he'd done his job, he went back to his farm. He might have been remembered as a great reformer, but he wasn't, because his methods were those of a bloody tyrant. And what I find interesting about that is that this is sort of where we get to the essence of how we do history and why it's all relevant, is that, you've been in the class, there's lots of things that we do know about Sulla, what we don't know about Sulla, that we can debate. And there's a lot of details here that we could have a discussion about. So even something small like he retired after 3 years, this is debated. Maybe it was only 6 months, and you might be thinking, well, does it really make much difference? You see, what does make a difference is when we think about the narrative. So it's not the details, it's the narrative, it's the big picture. And the big picture that you see coming through here is Sulla's a great reformer. Sulla roots out corruption. He stands up for traditional values, and then he retires after he's done his job and goes back to his farm. So even someone who's writing this article, who's critical of Sulla, will accept all of these statements. And what I find interesting is that if you really want to criticise Sulla, you will challenge those statements. And that's something that I've been doing in some of the work that I've been doing since we had the class, which is that if you see Sulla as someone who rooted out corruption, he's actually someone who was he fostered corruption.
I agree with you, because he made all his friends rich, and this money was coming from a very dodgy.
Exactly. So we've got confiscations. It's a civil war period. No one's acting from good motives in a civil war, or very few. Let's say the best thing you could do is try and not be involved, and if you are involved, then you're in it for your own interests. So the idea that he roots out corruption, it is something.
I don't think he did, in my opinion.
Exactly, and I would want this to become the new narrative. The idea that he's a great reformer, and this brings us back to the idea of what he's in the civil wars for. So I would say yes, he's in it for his own interests. He's also in it to make his followers rich. He needs the followers to give him legitimacy, because if you have a civil war faction, which is basically just you and your army, you don't have the legitimacy. You want to get as many people involved as possible. It's partly for what's the word I'm thinking? There's a word that's very obvious, and it's just slipped my mind. Sorry, it will come back to me. I know it starts with C.
That's fine.
Starts with C.
But would you agree with me that he didn't bring values? He just re-established Senate as the most powerful in the Roman state. So he really didn't bring something new. So as a reformer, in my opinion, he wasn't really a reformer.
He did do some reforms, and I think that was window dressing. I think that after a civil war, there's an expectation that you're supposed to do some reforms and reorganise the state. But if we see that as the be-all and end-all, then you get one narrative. If you see that as just something you do to make your faction look good, then you get a different narrative. And you can always go beneath what people see on the surface to what's happening underneath. And underneath, I think it's about land transfers, it's about money, it's about making people rich. So when we have the statement that he voluntarily retired, he'd completed his work and went back to his farm, I've got an idea that Yes, he did voluntarily retire, but that's because his faction told him that, we don't need you anymore.
Yeah.
So there's different ways of just seeing the dynamics. And what I find interesting is that even people that are very critical of Sulla will sort of work off the same framework. So I think there's scope for changing the framework, and then we get a new vision for how things are working in the late Republic. So,
but do you think he came back? Is there any evidence that he went back to the farm? So as long as I know, he had a nice life with his villa and slaves and. Because when people say back to his farm, is in the imagination that he went to work and in the fields, but he
exactly. That's I wasn't going to make a point to that, but the author of the piece, because Sulla's a dictator, there is this image of a different dictator, Cincinnatus, who goes back to his farm after he finishes the dictatorship. He was called from the plough, and I think that's a mixed metaphor, that someone has confused Sulla with somebody else. But I wasn't going to worry about that because people make mistakes, and that's fine. That's not the big deal. But the original question you asked, Yava, was Sulla the first? And I'm sort of thinking that's not necessarily the most interesting question, because if you pose it like that, it's almost as if everything was fine, then Sulla came along and
make a mess.
And then destroyed what was a perfectly functioning system. One of the comments on the article was talking about polarization, and that's true. It is a period of extreme polarization. But my question then is, where is the polarization coming from? Often people will sort of take it sort of one step, when what we can do is take it 2 steps back to find the origins. And if we look for the explanation of polarization and we say there is a breakdown of elite consensus, that's often what is said. Have I answered the question? I've just said another way. I've just described polarization in another way. So I haven't answered the question. And there's one person that I've come across quite recently. And it's this guy here that I've brought along, Peter Turchin. He's written a number of books. This is one of them, and there's about 5 or 6. There's a new one just come out. He has a general theory of growth decline of large states, and when he's talking about polarization, he sees that not as the starting point, but sort of already halfway through that process of decline, where ultimately everything is starting with, for example, overpopulation, which leads to the poor getting poorer. In the initial phase, the rich getting richer. And then as more people become rich, more people have money, the crucial thing that he identifies is what he calls elite overproduction, where everyone is competing for a set small number of elite posts. So if we think about the Roman period, elite posts at the top level would be consuls. How many consuls are there? 2. Does that change? No. The next job down, praetors. In the Sullan period, there are 6. He increases it to 8. Why does he increase it to 8? Well, there's a good reason why he's increasing it to 8, because there's more people out there. There's more competition.
And more territory as well. Control the Roman state needs more direct control.
Exactly, but there are different ways of trying to answer the question. And usually when people say, why does he increase the number of praetors from 6 to 8? The answer tends to be, what are praetors for? They look after the courts. There are more courts being established, so we need more praetors. Praetors also go out and govern provinces. There are more provinces, so we need more praetors. But if you see the way those questions are being answered, it's basically a constitutional administrative history answer to the question. But if we sort of think about the dynamics of politics at the centre, elite overproduction, too many people going for too few jobs, you can see it differently. The increasing the number of praetors from 6 to 8 sort of softens that somewhat. The number of quaestors at the bottom of this triangle of offices where you go up, that doubles, so it goes to 20. And there are things that shouldn't really make much of a difference, so the number of priesthoods goes up. So all of this is a, let's say, a cheap way of sort of increasing elite jobs. The Senate is doubled. Again, you can increase the elite jobs from that. So on a short-term basis, the people that win the Civil War are happy because they've got those prestige jobs that they wanted.
Okay.
The only problem then is that in the next generation, if you've got a triangle, the triangle has now become steeper because there are more people coming in at the bottom. So then that problem of elite competition to get to the top jobs, leading to instability, is just pushed down the line. So if we're thinking, was Sutherland to blame? Of course, he contributed to the mess, along with many other people. But we can also think about what are these structural forces, economic, political, cultural, that get us to that point. And that's why I find this framework really fascinating, to think of both of them working together. Of course, there were a lot, if you talk to academics, a lot of them will say, oh, I hate great man history, big man history. I know that when you said you liked Tiberius, you thought he was a strong character, that there was something about him as an individual. And I agree. I think there is a place for thinking about individuals shaping events. But at the same time, if we can step back from that and we see these broader social, demographic, other forces that are sort of channeling people into certain types of actions and behaviours, that's where I think things get really interesting, because that's, if we look at our sources, that won't be in there on the surface. We need to really dig to find that.
Yeah, I agree with you that because if Sewell lived 100 years earlier, maybe even if he wants to, how I describe it, deliver the first blow to he wouldn't, because the set of the mentality of the people was different. The Roman state was smaller, and how you said, there was less struggle. There always been struggle for power in the Senate and aristocracy, the family of the aristocratic families, but it wouldn't happen. So I think it's just, it's many factors contribute to this to come, and that's related to my next question, which is as well, it happened because the times were different in this period of Sulla and Marius. My next question is related as well to that. Do you think when Marius established this professional army, which I think, in my humble opinion, it's badly needed, because the Roman Empire already, the Roman state was extended, and you can't have seasonal army anymore, or in some point you have to have reforms, and it happens to be Marius who did that reforms. Do you think, as becoming the leader, the only person who was trusted, and the boundary built between Marius in this case and his army, it's a precedent that will lead as well one of the factors that led later to civil wars?
I have to confess that I don't have a strong opinion on this. So at one level, I've always found it something of a paradox. So Marius does do a lot, and people want to give those reforms a big significance. But at the same time, if we think about the period in which Rome expanded the most, it's about 100 years earlier. So Rome managed to conquer the Mediterranean without the marine reforms.
But but it was dangerous though, wasn't it? Not dangerous that he built this professional army, which later times they will be paid and loyal only to one leader, which it's dangerous, I think, for the state, because we can see that even the level further in the 3rd, 4th century, we had 2-3 emperors in the same time proclaiming the east, in the west, in the north, and that's why I could kind of see what is the danger precedent of this, because they are not loyal anymore to the Senate, to the people who are from. They're only loyal to the leader, and the leader can lead them to anywhere. If he's not satisfied, he can lead them to Rome or anywhere. Do you think it's a danger creating this professional army in that sense?
So yeah, no, I'll accept that. So unless I can come up with a reason to an alternative, then I guess the standard view we'll stick with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now that we've kind of spoken about the pair of them, if you had the chance to meet either Marius or Sula, who would it be that you would meet? Where you'd sit down and maybe you'd ask them, why did you do this way? Or if maybe it's their characteristics that draw you in. Which one of the two would you prefer to just sit down on the table and just talk with them?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, like, if I met, I mean, for a start, you'd have to think, okay, which one, in terms of their personality, would you actually want to talk to at all? Or would want to talk to you? So that's a tricky one. I'd probably end up, I mean, with Sulla, that would be such an awkward conversation because he'd probably be thinking, why are you spending all your time worrying about this stuff? You know,
Yeah.
and secondly, you know, and then you'd find the answers to all those things that you've been trying to figure out. You know, the little problems of chronology or this or that. So I don't know. Maybe am I still allowed to meet someone else instead, like Augustus or something?
Well, that wasn't the answer, but I expected. Yeah, sure, yeah. And now that many historians believe that Marius and Sulla were the first ones to start from the Roman Republic, the transmission and the transformation to the Roman Empire. Also, many historians believe that it was Augustus that kind of sealed the deal and finished it off. Do you think, which leads us on to our question, do you believe that Augustus learned from Caesar's mistakes as he managed to keep the facade of the Republic, and also he never proclaimed himself as a dictator for life? And also, even the way Caesar acquitted some of his enemies and the people that conspired against him, which was the exact opposite of what Augustus done. He was more ruthless, he didn't forgive, which eventually earned him the nickname, the Teen Butcher. So, do you think that Augustus learned from Caesar? Yeah,
definitely.
Okay.
So there's a difference in personality as well. You do get the impression that Octavian Augustus is somewhat more calculating, probably able to keep things closer to his chest. One of the secrets, which you could see as common sense, is he has a few advantages, but he doesn't rush into things. He takes things slowly, and he also knows how to say what people want to hear. So the interesting one of the interesting little anecdotes we have, I think, is what he's supposed to have said on his deathbed. So one of his last words was something along the lines of, "Clap me from the stage because I've acted my part well," or something like that. But the point is that he sort of viewed himself as an actor, so it's all about maintaining the pretense. So if the Senate want to believe that they're in charge, you want them to believe that. They preserve the fiction that he's not the sole ruler.
Yeah.
Likewise, so you sort of allow these little fictions to exist, and just keep both sides happy. Make sure that you don't say anything offensive. So again, Caesar, by contrast, says the Republic is nothing.
Yeah.
The Republic doesn't exist. And that's one way to just offend people.
Yeah. Okay.
And proclaim himself dictator, for example.
Exactly.
Did you ever have a thought that what I thought of Augustus, that Augustus has one unique ability, that he could judge very well the people who can be loyal to him. He has sensitive, like Agrippa, that he knew he can make a huge political career because he's not significant background, but he knew that he's an extremely good general and he will be loyal, and like keeping people around you with this kind of ability and senses them loyalty. I think Augustus, one of the greatest ability he had is that he could sense which kind of people to surround himself and who to put in where in charge, because if you make a mistake, then you could be gone.
The other one, which I think is quite interesting, is the way that Augustus also, even the little things, he makes sure that he comes out on top. So just if you imagine to yourself that you are sort of you are in conversation with somebody, you're walking down a corridor, you come to a door, and one of you has to open the door, and then sometimes someone says, after you, and then if the other person says no, after you, what do? Do you yield and then go through the door, or do you stand your ground and say no after you and make them go through the door first? You see, Augustus would be the person who, once he'd made a decision like that, would not back down. Even in a tiny sort of social situation. There's one story that we hear about where he had a meeting with Antony, where things were already quite tense between the two of them, but they were having a meeting. They happened to come across each other at a river, and the question was, whose side of the river will they actually meet on to shake hands? And I think it was Antony said, no, I'll cross over to you, and then Octavian says, no, I'll cross over to you. So then eventually Octavian got his way. And it was just a little thing to prove that, it's just a little bit of one-upmanship. And the mistake that Antony makes is that he's 20 years older. He's a very experienced general at this time. He often looks down on Octavian thinking this is only a kid. And that's his mistake. He thinks that he's the bigger man and he's got enough prestige that whatever little games Octavian is playing doesn't matter. But it does matter. That's his mistake. He doesn't realise that these little gamesmanship things make a huge difference.
Yeah, and maybe adding to his character, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, as long as I remember, is that as well, how you said, he didn't want to be outshined either. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he kind of was behind the scenes organizing to Crassus' grandson to be killed, because he's the last one who wasn't princeps to be honored a triumph against actually killing the king, one Thracian king. And of course Augustus didn't look that very happy with this event, and he organized somehow behind the scenes to Crassus' grandson to be killed. That's fit his description.
I have come across that episode, and it is one where people talk about the need for the emperor to have a monopoly on that sort of prestige. But I haven't looked at the details of it, so I can't say for sure whether, what exactly was happening behind the scenes. I haven't really thought about it that much, but yeah,
but it could be plausible, that he organizing it, and he didn't want to be outshined. Like the triumph and the glory is for me, not for anybody else. Okay, here again, the next question is about Augustus. Do you think, really look at the late Republic, early Republic, and then the Empire, that really the Augustus time was the golden age, and by taking into consideration as well literature that Publius Vergilius Maro, which is Virgil, more known, and Ovid lived in his time. And even in literature, Latin literature, he had such a prolific writers, and in that sense also that was the golden age of the Roman state.
I think so. I think we can make a good case for that. So we have the literature, we have sculpture, we have architecture, we've got coinage, but I guess when people talk about the golden age and then lesser ages following, I guess this is just something about our discipline that to begin with, classics is all about literature. So if the standard of poetry goes down, then the golden ages is disappearing. But I suppose if you use different measures, you might get...
Because I read one article that he pointed at Nero as a golden age, because he was commissioning all this art, and Petronius was, as they were writing in his time, but we only can guess that he forced him to suicide. I got a slap in my hands when I said he did it with new CD, and rightly so, because I was pointing very strongly, and there is no evidence that he really forced him to commit suicide, but some people will say Nero as well, because he commissioned so much art, and But yeah, okay, so yeah, Augustus is the golden age, and we should not forget that he's the longest ruling emperor in the whole Roman Empire.
I'm just trying to think of other measures that we could use. So
factors that would kind of indicate really what is the
and
golden age.
and as well also that he stabilized the empire. Like I know that the disaster in Germania, it was really disastrous with the legions he lost, but generally speaking, he stabilized the empire and kind of set of really peace for a long time, even though there were some conflicts. And in that sense as well, it's maybe in a way a golden age.
So the other way we could look at it would be, look for alternatives. So if you've picked this poster, it's a bit in the kitchen.
Yeah.
If you had to think what's the iconic building in Rome, well, okay, it's the Colosseum, and that's post-Augustan, that's Flavian. So
Flavian.
would you make a case for the Flavians as being also a golden age? If you go looking around other parts of the Mediterranean, this is not something that I've really thought about too much, but a lot of the places that you go to, certainly in the wider Mediterranean, Eastern Mediterranean, North Africa, Levant, the cities that have some really good architecture surviving will often be, it'll often be the first, second century AD where a lot of that stuff is coming from. So you can make a case for those periods being the golden age. Gibbon famously thought of the Antonines as being the golden age period. Yeah. But then I've been reading this guy, Peter Turchin, and he's got a few chapters talking about, various periods of Roman history. And there was something in there that I'd never come across before, which is that actually in the High Roman Empire, 2nd century AD, you have almost obscene levels of wealth inequality. So you think about the late Republic, and we all know about Crassus being, being someone who was a plutocrat, being extremely corrupt and extremely wealthy. And his wealth was peanuts compared with some of the fortunes that people had in the 2nd century AD. So, we got this transition where over time, whatever we think of as classical Rome turns into the medieval period. And we think of those two periods as being so utterly different. And one of the things that we might think about is that the medieval period is based on serfdom, where the ordinary people are reduced to something that's not much better than slavery. But if you then take what I've been reading there at face value, and you see that there's actually a continuum where that inequality of wealth between the elites and the ordinary people is already starting to hit quite extreme levels in what we think of as the High Roman Empire, then we can see that whatever it is that creates the medieval period is already there. So they are still wearing togas, so they look classical, but the society they've got is completely different from what has been the norm 300 years earlier.
And it all depends which kind of evidence and how it looks, because I think in the ordinary life today, you can be an honest person, but from one act that many people saw it and they judge you by this act and saying, oh, he's a terrible man, he's awful man, but actually maybe it's quite opposite. And it's come up in my mind a comparison about Nero's golden house he tried to build now in the middle of Rome, and that was in the eye of everybody, and they said, oh, he's very flamboyant, he's spending too much public money. But then Tivoli was much bigger, but was outside of Rome. And nobody talks about it, or it didn't come to attention because it was outside. The Romans wasn't in their intention. So actually, Hadrian spent much more money and much vaster place Tivoli than the Golden House of Nero. So what I try to say in the context of what you're saying, sometimes it's not as it looks. We have to go deeper and. Try to see from different angles to find the truth, the historical truth. And again, maybe this question, it's obvious the answer, but who is your favorite emperor and why?
Oh, because I've told you already,
Augustus. But if you put first Augustus, who will be the second?
Well, you did ask why, so the standard reasons people give would be, that he's in this pivotal period of Roman history, but one of the reasons I do find him interesting is partly to do with his personality, those little things that I was telling you about, the fact that he's just somebody gets under people's skin, even though people underestimated him, and to begin with, he was just a kid. Somehow he had this winning mentality, and if people are sort of out there thinking, okay, how do I get on in life, who can I use as a role model, there are people going on to Twitter and various other platforms, they're looking for people to sort of give them a bit of that winning mentality, and Augustus is a great person for that, because he shows, if you sort of pick the right episodes, know how to read what's happening, then you can see some of that in there. Somebody who doesn't take no for an answer. Of course, he takes a lot of risks. But at the end of the day, he sees the whole contest as a sort of game where ultimately he sees that there's only going to be one winner, and he's convinced that that's going to be him.
My memory is hazy. What age he became the sole ruler for the Roman state? If you remember. So. It depends which year you want to pick. So after defeating Antony in Actium.
Right. Okay. So that's 63 is the number you need to remember. That's the birth year. 31. So that you'd have to know what month he was born in. And what month Actium was. But
more or less like.
Basically 32. But he was born in September. Actium was in August. So I guess that makes him still 31.
31. Okay. He becomes the sole ruler of the empire.
And the last question for today's episode is, tell us more about the statues of emperors that were erected throughout the Roman Empire, because some of them were erected throughout, an emperor's more fragile age, coming towards an end of their life, where they're still getting depicted as these young, strong, mighty emperors. That's one of the reasons. Is there a slight shade of propaganda, or was there another reason which I just thought of, just to add a few more alternatives in there? Would it be just because they want to leave a trail behind them, so for future civilizations, if they were to meet them, say, yes, obviously the emperor aged, but this is what he looked in his prime years? Or was it just for the aesthetics, just for the Roman citizens when they're passing by? But you can kind of see that those two link between the propaganda of them seeing him as strong and the aesthetics. So what's your opinion on it?
Okay, so youth to begin with. I suppose there needs to be, there's a balance, isn't there, of thinking, okay, so we've got the public official image of the emperor, but at the same time he needs to be recognisable. So it can't be there needs to be some sort of connection between what it actually looks like and the image. So I guess that's one balance. If you're thinking about staying young, so yes, Augustus does that. If we're thinking about some of the other emperors, Caligula stays young, but that's because he died at the age of 28.
They killed him very young.
Right. The other one that makes things a bit more complicated is that if you go through the standard reference books just to see, okay, so how many different images are there of Tiberius, for example, you're not going to find too many, and I suspect there aren't that many.
And why? Because he didn't want so many to be erected, or
it's just,
or maybe they were destroyed.
Not everything survives.
No evidence.
There are there's a lot that doesn't survive from antiquity. And that's just a fact. So, some emperors, if you think what is their portrait, you're not going to find that much evidence. Then when we get to the mid-imperial period, so definitely with the Antonines, so what is that? That's 2nd century AD. They get interesting because they end up with phases. So you have the princes, unbearded, youthful, but curly hair. So you have those portraits. You have the young man portraits, and then you have the mature portraits. So for those emperors, if you had, say, let's say, Caracalla, no, not Caracalla, I'm thinking of Commodus. He's got a whole sequence of, almost like baby statues. Young man statues, and then the mature ones. And then he gets the beard. He's got quite a light beard to begin with, and then the big bushy beard. So you can see quite a nice age sequence in them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that answered my question. Thank you very much. And this is what wraps up today's episode. It was a great pleasure having you on the podcast today, and it was a great honor to also have you. I learned lots today, and I'll definitely be rewatching the episode myself to pick up on the small details that I missed. And to anybody that's watching, thank you for joining us today. And if you want to see more of us, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and the notification bell, and we'll catch you in the next one.